Hello everyone, welcome back to In My Shed. I'm BC. We've got the frames up on the milling machine and just tried the first pass on the horns, and bugging me it didn't look right. So came out with one of these, put it up inside, and the frames are twisted. About 1.5 mil out at the top, both the same way over here, so although I've got cylindrical squares in, they're parallel all right, but offset. So I'll take buffer beams off first and just gradually strip it down to find out where I went wrong. But at least I didn't machine everything first. I found out at the first cut. How embarrassing. Parallel but crooked. Anyway, I'll bring you up close, we'll have a bit more of a look, and then I'll start to undo some bolts. Here it is a little bit closer. The reason I was putting it up in the mill, the axle boxes just weren't going up and down in the horns as they should. If you kept the axle dead level, it would run, but if you had any tilt at all, it would lock up. And that's purely because the top's further this way than the bottom. So the axle box, if it was perpendicular to the guides, just would jam up. So I caught myself, I was just about to make a bit of a machine pass all over it to get a bit more clearance, but I've got to get it straight first. So I'll hop into it and see what we can find. Well, here's the first piece of the puzzle, and I'm a little bit surprised by it. I know that the ends of the buffer beams are perpendicular to the frames within a couple of tenths of a thou. I put them both up together up on the horizontal borer and faced them off, so they're fairly true. But if I put my square across, the front stretcher bracket is recessed by about 2 millimetres. Now I had a bolt in the middle of the beam. I didn't have all the bolts in, just a skeleton crew. I had a bolt in there and that would have pulled that forward, but that shouldn't have tilted the frames over. Now they're still tilted towards me, but only about just under 1 millimetre, I'd say. So I think it might just be a case of jiggering the frames around and try and get them straight. I'm hoping, fingers crossed, but that's the first piece of the puzzle. That has to be moved forward by about 2 mil. Well, here's part of the problem. That's the brake shaft hole in the back of the left-hand frame, and those are the holes that the cylindrical square was put through, and right there the frame has a bow. So add that to a few other warps on that frame and it all compounds into additional error, additive error. So that's one place I'll start, straighten the frame. I'd say machining all the metal out of it has given it a wallop. It would have appeared good. I checked them after I cut the metal out. Had to straighten them a little bit, but I'd say it's just relaxed again. I'm going home for a few beers. Oh, bugger. Well, it's not what I wanted to find. All the stretches are out, bar the middle one, but it's undone. Okay, it's out now. Frames are still not square. So in the original setup on the cylindrical squares, I didn't do a very good job. So all I can do is slacken them off, line the frames a little bit better, and then see how the hell I'm going to line the rest of it up. If necessary, I'll go to the next size up metric bolts and turn the heads down. We see what's needed, but not what I wanted to find. Back to you when I see what's up. And I said stay tuned for another episode. Well, here it is. Still scratching my head a bit, but I did find a couple of things on this side. In this section, there's a haze in the scale, which appears to be a stress point when the plate was originally rolled. And from there back, that side of the frame has a little bit of a twist in it. But here's the upshot. Put the frames one at a time up on the table with some parallels under it, and there is an absolute weak spot right across there. You can get that part of the frames nice and level, and then gravity will just pull the back side of the frames around. So before I go twisting and straightening things in inverted commas, I don't like that word straightening, what I'll try and do is take some advice from Mr. Martin Evans and rebuild it a little bit more carefully. Now, the straightest part of the material, according to my straight edges, is in this front section. So what I will do is put in the mid stretcher, the motion gear stretcher, and build the front part of the frames first and make sure I get that dead square. And then if any twisting or bending is required, I will have a square box of reasonable rigidity to work off. And that could have been where the problem came in. I didn't get the front end of it set up square. Once this stretcher is in, I'll make sure that the front buffer goes on nice and square, because these brackets at the front that the buffer mounts to were machined off on a horizontal borer, so they're about as accurate as I can get anything flat and square. So I'll build that section up first. I'll leave the minor stretcher there out, and I'll leave the front toe stretcher because I have to add a little bit to the front bracket on that. And then I'll come back and put this stretcher in, and if I can get that section nice and square, the only correction I'll have to do will be in the rear part of the frames and hopefully on one side. So not going to bend it and make cruel things yet, just going to reassemble it and be a little more careful. Up here it's a lot more accurate than it was on my build bench. I've got a beautiful flat mill table here, and to be honest, if there's a thou or two error in the mill table, a thou or two on a set of frames wouldn't matter a rat's bum. So I'll get that done and bring you back. Well, finally the frames are nearly right. There's the offending little bastards, this row of bolts here. The two sides of the stretcher are parallel, and it's only about 100 or 200ths of a millimetre difference in width from one end to the other. So the big error was in the placement of the holes. Even though I'd spotted through the frames, it must not have been aligned properly. And as these bolts were tightened, it was just pulling the frames over and down. So I had to elongate the holes a little bit, and I'm not overly concerned about that. These bolts are not going to be in any sideways forces. Tom Lipton from Ox Tools did a test on that size bolt, that's 1032 sockethead cap screw or sockethead buttonhead screw, and someone chided him from not having enough clamping pressure on his mini pallet. So each one of these can pull up 1,200 pounds of force, which is just a staggering amount. And as there's 6 on either side, I don't think the frames will fall apart or get loose. So that's concluded this part of the repair. I've just got the rest of the stretchers to fit up, a little spacer to make, and then I can pull it all apart again and paint it. Bit tedious. Okay, I hope this has been a little bit of an insight. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next weekend.